Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today, and welcome to our session on the future of readiness in an AI world. My name is Tim Morton. I'm one of the founders of Prompta AI, and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm thrilled. Sorry, let me start again because I had something coming in. I'm thrilled to be with you here today to discuss. To guide this important discussion about how AI is shaping the future of leadership and business transformation. At Prompta, we started this journey from an AI perspective back in 2018. And at that point, we were really focused on finding innovative ways to move change management and AI forward and use better data and better insights to drive better results and just give change people better tools. And it's amazing, in those first few years, people didn't necessarily know what we were talking about when we went and we were talking about AI and sentiment. But certainly over the last year plus, people really are starting to get it, and they're seeing it in their day-to-day. So we're proud that we started helping companies get future ready early when companies didn't know about it, but there's still a lot of work to do. So I'm also honored and so pleased to introduce to you our guest speaker, Gregg Brown from Change Readiness. Sorry, I'm going to say this right, Greg. Change Ready Leadership Solutions. And Greg, if you haven't met him before, he's an expert in organizational change. He's got incredible experience helping leaders navigate transformation in today's rapidly evolving business environment. We're really excited to have Greg here to share insights with us. And Greg, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone that's listening. Good to have you all here.
And I think all of our guests, they'll have an opportunity as we go along today to be able to share questions and comments in the chat as we move. And I think we'll have an opportunity to answer some of those questions towards the end of the session. So so as we start to think and get into this conversation, Greg, for you, what does future readiness mean in terms of AI adoption?
Well, I think, let's define change readiness and future readiness. When I think about, change readiness, I always think about, how ready are we currently for what can happen in the future? Meaning, what are our current skills we have? I find, change readiness is extremely valuable. We need it. And it's really about, how ready are we for change? It's very reactive, and it's really about change readiness is very much, looking at what our current skills and abilities are and how ready we are for change. Whereas future readiness for me is much more proactive. It builds on change readiness and really looks at how do we initiate, how do we create, how do we execute, how do we implement? And it's really that future focus. And I think with AI adoption, because AI is shifting so rapidly and is being used so rapidly in many different environments, a lot of it is about what is our mindset, what is our capability to actually engage in that? Because the AI of today is going to look very different in 2 months and in a year. Like it's rapidly evolving so fast. We think we're not going to be able to keep up, and yet, we know from our prior history that we can.
Yeah, and it's so true. And one of the big things that of course we're seeing out there is that fear of AI, and it's almost the fear that we were seeing when companies were moving to the cloud.
Oh yeah.
Or when they were moving to from Windows 7 in an organization to 365, and it really is that fundamental change that
Well, I think, I remember years ago, I've been in the talent development organizational change space for a long time. And I remember years ago, and for those of you listening, you might remember, everything was going to be online learning 25 years ago. Everything. We weren't going to have in-person classrooms, in-person conferences, all that sort of stuff. And of course, online learning is great for some pieces. And yet, what we certainly have learned in COVID and certainly coming out of COVID, yes, we can do stuff online. And yet, post-COVID, what we're seeing is everyone wants to be back in person. It doesn't matter if you're a raging extrovert like myself or a raging introvert at the other end of the scale. We need to connect with others, and it can be done online, but it's better in person. So I think there is that fear, and yet, people are worried about their jobs. And yet what we know is, like you said, with 365 and everything else coming in, what AI will do is take away some of our administrative tasks. And what it's going to require us to do is to embrace, higher level thinking skills like critical thinking, creative thinking, more business acumen, decision making. All the research is showing that we're going to need those because AI can only do so much. Tools do not replace wisdom. They don't. We still, as humans, need to be able to, if AI produces, someone did a post the other day on LinkedIn, and I'm like, I can tell that's AI because it's not their voice. It was using very big, grand words that nobody bothered to edit, and it wasn't 100% accurate anymore. Because it's like, they did this. I'm like, well, they didn't really do that. They were part of the team that did that. So you have to bring those skills. And even, I was at my doctor's office the other day for, my annual thing. And now they're using AI there that will record the whole thing. It makes recommendations to the physician afterwards, reminds the physician of what, you're going to do an x-ray, you're going to do this. And, my doc said he's saving an hour a day using it. And that's eventually going to be integrated with medical records, so on and so forth. So I think, concerns of privacy and things like that are going to be what we all have to be aware of.
Yeah. And I think thinking about it too as an accelerator. And it's not the solution. I remember so many years ago was a big SAP implementation, and the leadership was there, and they were surrounded by all these consultants, and they were talking like they had solved cancer, and we're going to be able to do this and this. It's going to be brilliant, and of course it wasn't. It was an accelerator, and it was a tool. Yeah. And we still needed to take people on that change journey and prepare them and help them to have the tools and the capabilities and the ways of working and all of those things that are so very important, but so overlooked. And I think one of the things too, as you said, your doctor's using it as an enabler, and thinking about that, what can that 1 hour be used? It could actually be used for some work-life balance with their family, or potentially some days to take on a few more patients.
Absolutely.
And especially with the doctor shortages, I think that's just brilliant. So,
well, and the trick is with this, and it's such a good reminder for people that are using AI just to generate letters, is that the doc's not just going to go through and go, oh, thank you, AI, I'll recommend an exam. I don't know anything, I'll just do this. The doctor's not afraid that the job is going to be replaced, because they still have to make a decision around what's the right course of action, because wisdom will always, ride to the top.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're seeing is we're talking to companies about all of the things that you need to do in order to get ready for AI within your organization. Just don't throw it out there, because we know when you do that, a lot of people aren't going to use it, or they're not going to use it to the way that you think. But the other thing is the companies who are completely pretending that it doesn't exist.
Yes.
We know that people will do, bring your own AI. They're going to use tools, and that's where some of the problems. Yeah,
it's all in our phone.
Yeah, and the big risk for companies is when companies start, BYO AI, is suddenly that's when your data could get compromised, right? Because somebody's trying to save some time. Oh, I'll just pump this into a free version of ChatGPT. And oh, look at how it helped. But then, of course, we've got a big potential mess because that's now in the public domain, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, and I think you had a really good point. You know, organizations really have to consider, you know, and some of the pieces I look at is, you know, the Montreal AI, there's a Montreal AI Ethics Institute. So for those of you that are interested, you can just Google it. There's tons of great research and connections and recommendations around AI. And, you know, there's ethics around how we use this and how we tell people we use this. You know, everyone is smart enough to see when it's AI. Like if someone uses ChatGPT or any generative AI, I can tell. Like, you know, and if people think they're going to write their book that way, they're wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you might use it to generate a word or a new phrase, but you still have to bring your decision-making capabilities. And one of the pieces I think is really important for people that are afraid to go, you know, back to your initial question about this, is to remind people that we're using it every day. Siri is AI, voice texting is AI, your phone listening to you, all that. Like there's all this stuff that we're already doing.
Yeah.
And it's making our lives easier.
Yeah, indeed. So you know, one of the things that I was thinking about is for organizations, you know, the focus too right now is building and maintaining that future ready culture. You know, what do you suggest that they look for here?
Well, I think you know, first thing I like to suggest for people is sometimes to be future ready, you have to look to the past. And as leaders and business owners, we have to remind our teams that they have the skills and capabilities to get through whatever the future brings because we've done it in the past. And the most recent example, certainly that is, I would say, the biggest sort of generational piece that we'll see in Western Europe and in North America is COVID. And if you think about the beginning parts of going through COVID, which was, you know, 4 years ago now, 4.5 years ago, thank goodness. I don't want to do it again. But, you know, we didn't have any information. We didn't know what was going on. And yet we rolled with the punches. All of us did, you know, in the workplace, I'm talking about, and at home, because we had the first time in North America and Western Europe, the integration of work and home, like more than we've ever had. And if you think about the skills and abilities that the new ones that people developed in that time, and we all developed a new set of what I call sort of change muscles, you know, skills, abilities that we didn't have before. We all developed something new. And as leaders or business owners, our job is to remind ourselves and our teams, you know, to identify what those are and how we can use them to navigate the future. That's sort of the first step, because what I really believe is if you can do COVID the way we did it in North America and Western Europe, there's not much you can't do. You know, if you really think about it, that was our defining moment. You know, other places, you know, I do work with CDC and UN and stuff like that. If you lived in Syria, COVID was not your defining moment. You know, the folks who were on calls who were on Syria were like, we're just happy not to be bombed today. But they have a whole new set of skills. You know, and I'm not minimizing war by any means by saying that, because it is extremely traumatic. And certainly the people I talk to around the world who are in it, you know, it's awful. So I'm not minimizing, but there's a whole new set of skills and abilities that, you know, once you come out of awful situations, you can think about using. So that's the first part. Second part is, I think it's and there's tons of research on this, you know, is really being able to open up our mindset and have a growth mindset around the future. And it sounds intellectually easy, but when we're under pressure at work and things are coming in and ideas are coming in, or decisions, or, you know, regulatory legislative changes, whatever it is, depending where you work, you know, you might be that person that I used to be and say, Tim, that'll never work. I've been here 11 years. Not going to work. So I do have a growth mindset, but if it goes against what I believe, you know, it's so intellectually it sounds good, but we need to have that, because, you know, often what we believe is not true. You know, it's not true it's not going to work here because I've been here. That is not a true statement. Parts of it might not work, parts of it might. So that's the first part. The second piece, well, I guess first part was, looking back. What is our skills, abilities that help us in the past? Growth mindset. Second one is third one is you have to be open to innovation. And by innovation, again, it means, and everybody says, oh yeah, I'm really open to innovation, but people aren't open, and this ties into mindset. People aren't open to ideas that feel disruptive to them, that come down upon them, that are forced upon them. Workplace is hierarchy by definition. Workplaces are not a democracy. And though we want to be inclusive, and so they're not a democracy. They're usually top-down driven with some, bottom-up stuff that funnel in. We don't run organizations on consensus, whether that's not-for-profit, government, or whatever. So there's that, ability to be open to new ideas and innovation. And the third piece is really about how do we take action in the face of uncertainty. So you got to get your mindset engaged. You have to be open to new ideas so you can start thinking differently, which we all did during COVID. And coming out of it, we have to start thinking differently, and we have to do that with AI. And the third piece is, how do we execute with confidence? How do we take action in that face of uncertainty and what I always tell people is do some risk management around that, and that'll help you take some action.
Yeah, it's it's fascinating even thinking about COVID and from a change and transformation perspective, it was so interesting because we were hearing from people because we had to do it. It was an emergency. It was get off the plane. Get off the plane, like get off the plane. It's emergency. Get down those slides, and we'll figure it out. And I think one of the things we saw was some leaders were saying, well, because we've been able to do this, we don't need any support from going through transformation. And and one of the things that I was able to share with them was, well, yeah, you know what, that was an emergency. In an emergency, we're going to figure it's easy to figure out because we have no choice. It's as we're thinking about AI, we do have a choice, and it's that we now have to figure out how it's going to impact people, because it is coming eventually. And for so many companies and so many leaders, they just can't ignore it. And you talked about that growth mindset, and I think one of the organizations we worked with, they actually had a value which was, and I loved it. It was yes before and no. And because
what does that mean?
What it means is let's have an openness before we say no. Because because so many are just, hey, this is the way we do it. This is the way we've always done it. This is, we've heard this all before. And it's so easy when somebody's trying to be innovative and they're trying to come up with new ideas or how things might work. So often people are getting shut down. No.
Well, and the thing is this, we know from the research, and we know from, the workplace, and anybody listening knows this. No one brings ideas to meetings that are fully formed unless they show up with a business case. And what we know, no one brings up ideas they think are silly. They might say, this might be a silly idea, but they're not going to bring it up just to look silly. So, the trick with innovation is, 10% of Race's idea might be good, 10% of Tim's idea might be good, 10% of Rob's idea might be good. And you have to allow 10 plus 10 plus 10 to collide for innovation to occur, because ideas need to collide.
Yeah.
And 10% of the idea might be good. So 90% might be a no, but 10% might be good. So let's tease that out. And that doesn't take a lot of time.
No.
When I'm speaking on stage to 1,000 people, we can generate, I do something fun that where we I throw out an idea that's completely disruptive and weird, and they all have to write down one good thing about this idea. And it's hard to unhook about why you think it's wrong or bad or this, but you can do that in 2 to 3 minutes. And it generates lists of criteria. It generates new ways of thinking that we didn't have before. Because that's, with AI, it's going to help us with some of that generation. And as leaders, we still have to figure out how to create the space to be able to do that, creative thinking, decision making, critical thinking, and all that stuff.
It's so true. And as you said, the 10% from Ray, 10% from Greg, the 10% from Tim, maybe it's 10% from AI now.
Yeah,
that's
for
another
sure.
That's another voice coming with a different perspective as well.
Well, and yeah, I agree. And the example I give with people is, we've all done it where we've dictated a text message. We've not read the text message and we've hit send. And you have to, correct it. And it's an example of using AI rapidly and not double checking. And I've had, certain 4-letter words pop up that shouldn't be popping up because it auto corrected. And if I'd sent that, I might have been in a little bit of trouble business wise, so you have to, and it's always a reminder to me with something simple like voice texting or something more serious, whether it's generative AI or other types of AI.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's an important watch it. It can't be 100% in AI we trust. This is another tool, and it's becoming more informed, and it's bringing so many new features, but again, we can't lose our role in it and our intuition.
Well, and I think a big piece of that too is that AI, I read somewhere maybe a year ago that said AI's come in so rapidly, it's like opening Jurassic Park and not installing the electric fences. And it was a great metaphor and analogy. I can't remember whether it was a metaphor and analogy, but to me, it was a great example of what has happened with AI. Because what we're seeing is, and this happened with Amazon, there were all these AI books popping up that didn't make any sense. There were titles that didn't make any sense. There were just gobbledygook that Amazon was selling, and they were called to task for allowing gobbledygook books to be sold on their site. So this is the challenge: is that we may not. AI is coming in so rapidly, we might not have policies in place or practices to monitor. And so it's going to come in, and then we get, like, Amazon got bit hard for that, because it does yield hard lessons and painful costs in terms of how rapidly it's happening. And the Montreal AI Ethics Institute calls it zombie policies, which I just love that term of zombie. These policies that are sort of walking around like the Walking Dead, and they're not relevant anymore because AI is here. So policies around stuff like, how much of this was written by AI, or was it just reviewed by AI, or did I use a few words by AI? Pieces around privacy, other ethical pieces, and how we're going to use that. Because even with ChatGPT, the research in it's only up to, I think, 2.5 years ago. So if you go, give me a recent example of a company using AI, it's going to give you some example 2 years ago. Most people don't know that.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. So from your perspective, how can organizations develop a strategic plan to become future ready in this AI driven world?
Well, I think it's anticipating what could be happening around policies, practices, governance models, all that sort of stuff. I think as part of strategic planning for this, you can also use AI to help with a strategic plan. That's the bonus. And again, you have to ramp up your decision-making, strategic thinking skills, because strategic thinking should be used a lot of the time versus just reactive thinking. And of course that funnels into strategic planning. And I think it's going to be, part of strategic planning is anticipating that we're going to have faster launch opportunities, probably for initiatives. Maybe we'll have faster risk management identification. Maybe we'll be able to anticipate problems quicker and get recommended solutions faster. There might be a greater sophistication in selecting certain methodologies. You might be able to select change initiatives and goals and whatever else the organization wants to do. Select those using some sort of algorithm that's going to help you rapidly determine if we should do this. And just like algorithms are about machine learning and AI and with algorithms, there's algorithm bias auditors is a big job these days because there's a lot of bias. There was a great example on I think it was CNN or one of the American news organizations last year about a woman who had robbed a convenience store, and AI took the image of the woman, profiled her, and pumped out the couple of the names. And unfortunately, a woman was arrested who matched the same name and identity of this person. But what AI failed to do was to identify that the woman that they just arrested was 8 months pregnant, and the woman that had actually robbed the convenience store 3 days before was clearly not pregnant. And and she's suing for a lot of money, and rightfully she should. But it was just an example of relying on AI without doing the decision. Like, it just needed someone to critically think and look at it. That's all you needed to do here and go, oh, someone's pregnant, someone's not. This obviously is not the right person, even though everything else matches.
Yeah, and even I saw a real example last year, and I don't often use things from sports, but this was actually the wild card playoffs last year, and the Blue Jays were playing the Minnesota Twins, and they had from AI they had crafted this plan and this strategy.
Oh, I love that.
And it was they ran all the numbers and understood that after 2 or 3 innings they needed to switch pitchers. Meanwhile, the starting pitcher was on fire, was having the start of the game of their lives. Meanwhile, they're warming up another pitcher here because this is what the numbers and the analytics and all of the AI was telling them to do. But what they weren't doing was they weren't trusting their intuition. They weren't actually looking with their eyes and seeing what was happening and realizing during this time something actually different is happening here and now, where it's not business as usual. This guy's on fire today. Let's deviate based on what we're seeing with our eyes. And it's having that ability to trust your intuition, trust your people within your organization, trust your historical knowledge, and then use AI as a way to inform that. And I'll let you. I'll let you respond.
I think you had a good point, which is, AI is great for automating things like, let's say I want to get some qualitative feedback and quantitative feedback about an initiative that we've launched. It can do all that time-consuming stuff of taking the stories, taking the data, crafting something that's usable. That is what is so great about it. So instead of you sitting there compiling or someone on your team compiling it, it will do that. And then, it'll spit it out and send it back. Just like, if I do a speaking engagement that I think is really good, I'll sometimes send off, the video to get transcribed. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get and it's just AI transcription because it's cheaper and I don't need, because I'm going to go through it with a fine tooth comb anyway. But it saves me a huge amount of time in the old days of listening to something and typing away. And if you're old like me, you'll know what that is. But I think AI is so good about revealing potential problems and risk. I love it for risk analysis. Yet, like what you say, we still need to use our own experience, our own wisdom, our gut, our intuition to actually go, is this the right approach? And that's the thing with policy, right? I'll often remind people, policies sometimes cannot be followed to the letter depending what's going on. There was I work with an organization, and it'll remain nameless for this example, but the one of their senior people or junior people who didn't make a lot of money. I'm thinking they probably made $50,000, which isn't generally, that's sort of for an admin level role, which this person did, but they'd been with the organization for 30 years. They were 70 years old, just got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. They had 6 months to live. And so the person was supposed to go into LTD and all this stuff. And the CEO said, I know the policies to do this. We're paying the person's full salary right through. We're not going to do it for anybody else right now. This isn't a change in the policy, but I'm overriding this because it's the right thing to do. And while that's not an AI example, it's an example of using your wisdom to make a decision that's right for that moment in time. Because otherwise you end up with policies and stuff that aren't relevant anymore.
Yeah.
And your workforce is made up of people. And we all know with the gig economy and the way people want to work today, it's hard to find and keep staff, employees, management, doesn't matter what level. And your people are how you get your work done.
Indeed. And I think that's the great example of when the computer says no.
Yeah.
It's not always no. As a leader, you've got to really take into account what's really happening, and you've got to lead. And
Absolutely.
And just thinking about too, from a strategic planning perspective, one of the ways we've really seen that AI can really support is understanding sentiment. So in the past, what we were seeing was leaders only had so much information in order, that they were bringing in order to inform the strategic plan. But now, when we, from various stakeholder groups, we're actually able to get a really good understanding of what are those needs and wants, what's working, what's not working, provide that sentiment back, and then there's still the job of that group that's working on the strategic plan. They still need to do their job, but ideally they're better informed.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great piece about strategic planning and the integration of AI for sure.
Yeah. So, I was just thinking about workforce and leadership within the AI world.
Mm-hmm.
What specific qualities should leaders develop to guide their organizations through this transition to AI integration and future readiness?
Well, some of the research is coming out from Gartner and McKinsey and a few others. I think some of the biggest things I'm seeing are being able to, which sort of doesn't sound like AI, but I'll explain it. One of the biggest skills that saying leaders are going to require is conflict management skills, which is really interesting to me when you think about the context of our world of work. Where this came from, I can't remember if it was McKinsey or Gartner. I apologize for people that are listening. They said, 50% of the planet is undergoing elections this year. And with what I would say is perceived polarization, that's the stuff that makes the news, that those conversations are going to be, dripping into the workplace a little bit. And then when you factor in AI into that, and what that looks like, you're starting to really see that leaders are going to have to really ramp that up. And I'm almost getting things on a daily basis these days, and I don't know about the people listening. If any of you that are listening, type it in that this is happening to you. But I would say once every day or every 2 days, I'm getting something from something I subscribe to that says, we did not do this video. It is this, how to recognize, deep fake videos, how to do this, how to, double check to make sure your emails aren't coming like this, and this is beyond just identity theft. This is what we do. This is what it looks like, how to deal with it. Because AI is creating, images, videos, and people are using those sometimes for nefarious purposes. And so I think it is about being aware that this stuff is happening, and that as organizations, as leaders, we need to be prepared for this and get our stuff together. I was going to use another word, to get our stuff together. And so conflict management, strategic thinking, critical thinking, of course, ethics, policy development, I think those are really, some of those qualities around it. And, like all leadership, it is about, being real clear about the language that you're using and how you're talking about it with the people that you work with, because the language is the currency with which we get our work done. And AI can produce some of that language. We still need to edit it, which is, you can use my constant theme these days that I'm talking to people about.
Yeah, indeed. And one of the things that we've been seeing, and it's amazing from a culture, from an organizational culture lens. We all know that image of the iceberg representing culture, and that 10% that's above, and the 90% that's hidden.
Yeah.
What's been so incredible from an AI perspective is we're uncovering that 90%. We're starting to see what that looks like. But as we see what that looks like, and as we give that information back to leaders and people managers, it's requiring people managers to have new skills and new capabilities and new abilities, because suddenly, as this comes to light, it's not coming to light from a blame or shame perspective. No. It's coming to, this is new information. And for a leader who's just seeing this for the first time, what do I do with it? How do I deal with this information? How do I prepare my team? How do I change my style of leadership or management, or how I work with my peers? And it's just fascinating, but it's for leaders and people managers, it's terrifying, because suddenly I didn't ask for this data, but here it is.
Well, and it's, and I think this is one of the good things about it is that, for dashboards for leaders, they'll be able to see, say projects or other initiatives, are we in green, yellow, red? Where are we at? Are we showstopper? What's going on? We should be able to see that data faster. And what I do think, though, is that leaders have to move away from feeling like they have to have all the answers about this, and part of being a leader is being able to show our vulnerability. And, during AI, most of us, sometimes we're, at the vision at the forefront, pulling people along, which I know that's what your company helps organizations with. Sometimes, as leaders, we're at the back as that quiet bulldozer. With AI, we're really leading alongside our teams. We're in the muck with everybody else trying to figure it out. And that's why we need experts like yourself to help us, because not all of us know what the heck we're doing. And as leaders, we have to be willing to realize we do not have all the answers. And we have to be willing to share that with our team, that we're in the uncertainty with them, and that we will work through it together and figure it out. And that takes away the fear. If you feel you have to be the expert in everything, that's a scary place to live. One of my core principles when I work with groups, whether it's workshops or keynotes, it doesn't matter. I'm not the only expert in the room. There's 1,000 people or 25 people who are experts in their own world. I have some expertise. They have some expertise. We're going to come together and try to, mingle it. And I think it takes the pressure off versus you having to go in going, I have all the answers about AI.
Yeah.
And the trick is, I think, is to really look at, stop trying to figure it all out yourself and start with, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to get information from? Then, those of us who are AI experts can't expect to learn and know everything, like this. So do some reading, do some research, go to webinars, get educated and talk to people about it. Because the more you do, the more you'll know and the easier it'll be to do it.
Yeah, and those leaders within organizations, they've already got all of that institutional knowledge that's so valuable, and they're getting thrown, different things. And I think that key is that openness to grow with their teams, to be a little bit vulnerable. I know it's overused, but the term being authentic. But it's I think what's gonna happen, and what we're starting to see is people who are coming from that fear-based leadership, where they're trying to put up walls around AI and automation and new ways of thinking and working together. It's becoming much harder for them, and I don't know if thinking about if there are people that aren't going to get through this, I think it's not being open to new ways of operating and new ways of leading.
And I think you're right. And what's really important, for people to know is that's not generational. There's always, it's like people over a certain age aren't good with technology. Well, that's crap. Like I am, I would say, a late technology adopter, but I love my Kindle as an example. Like I read everything on a Kindle now. And I know 25-year-olds who are very astute with technology, who will not read on a Kindle. They want a book. So I think, and my uncle, who's, 93, was a nuclear engineer, he is so computer literate. Generationally, yes, kids are learning right in school. So it's faster for them and easier at the uptake because that's what they're trained in, from a training perspective. Yet in terms of, I think it's so important as leaders to stay away from generational stereotypes because I do not believe they are accurate at all. There are some commonalities in how we learn because of our generation and stuff like that, but we're all different people. And, our culture, our generation, our background, that's a small part, of who we are. Not to minimize that, but from AI, my mom, when she was 80, was playing Sudoku with people around the world on her computer. She was so computer literate. And I think that, it's too easy to say, oh, I can't do technology or this or this. And what I recommend to people that are my age is get mentors that are younger than you. Mentoring is not just about age, it's about skill set, ability. I can tell you I have 2 or 3 mentors in my life who are in their 20s who've helped me with everything from, they're like, have you ever thought of doing this? I'm like, no, I don't even know what that is. And so get mentors that are different ages because they will help with AI adoption and understanding what is sort of what's intuitive to them can be really helpful to those of us that it might not be intuitive for.
Yeah, and I think what that'll do is that'll help leaders stay ahead of some of the AI trends, and then even ensuring their companies are at that forefront of technological adoption.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean getting rid of the old people like me.
No,
it means it means and people. I was just talking to someone this morning who I think she's 67. She is at the forefront of AI adoption in her organization. She's bringing it in so rapidly, and she just sees the benefits of it. So I think, leadership is not an age, and it's not, AI is not about age. And I think it's as leaders to not expect every young person to know about AI either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they may be scared as well. So
yeah.
So when we're thinking about AI and decision making, how can AI be effectively integrated into decision making processes to enhance future readiness?
Well, I think it can be used in a few ways. I think AI can be integrated, again, it doesn't take away human decision making, first off, but I think it can make recommendations based upon discussions, based upon courses of action. Just like I said, what was happening at my physician's office, it listens, and then it makes, send this person for an x-ray, would recommend this, do that. And then the physician determines if that's what really should happen because it's a medical, generative AI program that they're using. But so I think there's that. I think from, risk management, risk analysis, algorithms, better project selection, all of those pieces, I think it's really going to be helpful for because it's going to happen quickly. And I'm not an expert in the background programming or anything on that, so I can't really speak, but I see it as, what I tell people, about algorithms is, algorithms are doing what we do as people, which is, I can go into a situation that I'm very experienced with, and I can make pretty rapid decisions based upon groupings of data that I see. It might be, some people will say it's our intuition, but I've seen some research that intuition is just your brain and gut, whatever, your whole body's working so rapidly and integrating vast amounts of data, which is very much like an algorithm. And sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong. I mean, I like to think that 90% of the time I listen to my intuition and wisdom, I'm right. I like to think that. And I always tell people to pay attention to that. But algorithms are just that. It's decision making, but it's done in a mathematical formula.
Yeah.
So anytime we can take away human bias in decision making, I think is good. And
Yeah.
then use your wisdom to determine maybe that bias can be good too. Biases don't necessarily need to be bad, depending what they are.
Yeah. I think it's just understanding what your biases are and understanding what the biases potentially of the AI is as well. So,
Well, yeah, and our biases come out in our language. So when I say that's not going to work here, I've been here 11 years. I'm integrating a vast amount of information, making a decision, which is usually wrong, by the way. Like my team used to laugh and prove me wrong, and they proved me wrong constantly. It became a running joke because I usually am wrong with that because I'm jumping to a conclusion that's
yeah.
not accurate. And
Yeah.
algorithms and decision making and risk management and all that stuff that can help us, and it can do it faster for us. And I think it's all about, we're not all going to become data entry machines as people think. It's going to free up our time so that we can do deeper work. And, we're always going to need people.
Indeed, indeed. And for you, what do you think are the biggest challenges organizations are facing as they're preparing for this AI-driven future?
I think the biggest thing is going to be upskilling their existing leaders, teams, because they don't know what they need to well, they do know what to upskill to. We know that we're going to become more automated with certain things. So it's going to free up our time for decision making, creative thinking, knowledge of business acumen. It's like the old days of the secretary, that went into meetings and took shorthand. And my mother was one of those many years ago, and typed up the notes. That role has changed. We're looking at admin professionals who are doing high levels of strategic thinking about issues that weren't even relevant 20, 25 years ago. So, I think it's elevating. And I think the challenge is how do we upskill people rapidly and get rid of the automation that's happening so quickly? And I think, we have to do pilot projects around that. We have to, bring it in as gradually as we can. And yet sometimes we get, slapped in the face like Amazon did, which was, these crappy books are coming up that aren't real. We got to
Yeah.
respond. So I think there's going to be there's that challenge of knowing how to be proactive. And we don't even know what we're going to be facing. So we have
Yeah.
to build our skills to be able to, anticipate what that is and be open to it. So I think there's that, and I think it's, like I mentioned earlier, getting rid of those zombie policies, like getting on them, figuring out privacy and ethics now. Is it okay for us to produce fully AI generated material? Like that's a big question.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would argue it's probably not for most, but you might get people that say it is.
And certainly not if you're not sharing that it is AI generated. Even what we're seeing too now is when people are applying for jobs,
Okay.
you have to let them know what part of the process is AI, or even if AI is a part of the process, and it's essential.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Gartner was talking about some of the future work trends around that, and was saying that the traditional model of using AI for jobs is that skills are overtaking degrees in some areas. Meaning, so we're starting to see that just because you have a bachelor's degree in something, which has been used for what I would say the high school diploma these days to get a job, doesn't mean that you can actually do the job anymore. And so sometimes we're seeing people that are filtered out that could be great team members. And so it's again one of those examples that AI has come in and it becomes our baseline. But given the way the world has changed since COVID with gig economy, et cetera, you might not be getting the best team members then. So you're absolutely right. I think there's that set. And I was reading something about around publishing because my book came out last year and I didn't use AI for it because I didn't even really know that I could. But I'm glad I didn't. I used, a thesaurus for certain words. Of course, I had editors and all that stuff. But there's been some work coming out around the ethics of it and saying, has any text been generated by AI? Secondly, has it been improved? Thirdly, has any text been suggested, or has it been corrected by AI? And being able to really, when you're producing papers, documents, whether they're peer reviewed or not, being clear about what is and what isn't. Because I'm subscribed to someone's newsletter, it will remain nameless. All of a sudden, they started to pump out reams of newsletters on topics that I have no idea that they know anything about.
Yeah.
And I know that this is AI generated because no one's going to read a 5-page newsletter, first off, with 25,000 concepts in it. And I'm just like, this is too much. Like, I know it's not you.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's so true. And we know the voice of a person. We know how they communicate, and we know when it's not authentic. And that's just it's so important. We've just got a few
Sure.
moments left. And have we received any questions in the chat thus far?
Not at this point.
Yes, we got two questions.
Oh, good.
So one of them is you talk about the need to be open-minded to growth. With so many factors impacting growth, how would you unpack and quantify the ROI of AI initiatives separate from all other factors?
Well, that's a great question, actually. I had to wrap my head around what it actually meant for a second. So how would I quantify and separate out the ROI on AI? Stuff like, so to me, I'm just gonna get real basic. It could be something like, okay, so like, let me give you an example with my physician. This is a great ROI. I'm saving an hour a day by having these notes done up on AI. So I can fill this hour with something else. So I think if you start monitoring what is work, as leaders, well, what is some work that can be automated and taken away from my team so I can give them some real other work that's good, depending what it is. And looking at what is the percentage of that, how much is the cost attached to it, how much time is it saving, and what can we do with that saved time? So I think ROI is going to look different depending what sector, industry, and job. But Tim, you might have more to add to that.
Yeah. And I think that was a great example you had. One of the ones we have is, we've been tracking the amount of time and resources required from a change management perspective.
Oh, I love
because one of the things that we've been able to do is tailor change activities based on what people want and need and what's important, as opposed to, hey, we always supported people through change the same way. What if we limited it to what they want and need? We can limit the amount of time that leaders have to be involved. So it's more strategic, where people managers get involved in the change network. So what we're seeing overall is a 25% reduction in that amount of both hours and spend. And it goes up depending on what's happening on the project. But that's a good way too for us to start to measure from a baseline perspective. So I think it was a great question. And what's the second question?
Yeah, the second one is, are there any publications or newsletters you recommend subscribing to?
I like the Montreal AI Ethics. I subscribe to them because they have a full, well-rounded piece of like tons of different information, from policy through to practice through to change management. And yeah, that's one I do. And I think something also interesting is the World Economic Forum has a really good jobs report that came out. It's 2023, so it's about a year old, but still very relevant and talks a lot about AI and the skills required for the future. Tim, I'm sure you have a ton of resources.
Yeah, one of the best resources I found is there's a few groups on LinkedIn that are really dedicated to this, and they can be targeted to a specific area of AI or a specific of AI related to change or transformation. And for me, that's been a really positive space for me, and quite often it'll lead out to other great articles and publications. So that's one of the ones I've seen. So thank you for the questions, and thanks everybody that's that's been actively engaged in the chat. Gregg,
really good stuff.
any final thoughts from you, and also how can people learn more about you? How can they get in touch as well?
Sure. I'm just sort of looking at some of the chat pieces. I love what Joanna wrote. The fact of the matter is that AI has been around since the 40s, for sure. AI is as simple as walking up to a door and having it open because it senses that you're there. Like, that's some of the basic AI stuff. I like to remind people that it's been around. And I see some other pieces about bias, and Natasha says exposing a lot of truth. So true. So for those of you that want to stay in touch with me, I do have a couple of, we do have some resources that I wrote on 8 steps to navigate the future of work and be future ready. So we'll send that out to you for here. And an article I wrote on future work that includes a bunch of stuff on AI. So some additional resources. If you want to get in touch, best ways at my website, bechangeready.com. That's bechangeready.com. Or I'm on LinkedIn. You can just search Gregg Brown or Tim at Prompta, and I come up somewhere around there. So, we're friends on LinkedIn, so you can reach me through there, and would love to hear any feedback and stuff that you have about our conversation today.
And Gregg, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I found this conversation really enlightening. I'm completely energized, and I'm sure those that are joining us are as well. And thanks for everybody for joining. We're gonna send out those resources. We'll also send out a link to the recording, and that way, if you want to revisit the session or share with your colleagues, that's great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today, and looking forward to our next session. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Bye for now.